Good. I asked the students yesterday, they were like, good. I said, how you doing? And they yelled, so go ahead, how you doing? There we go, that's great. How many folks are here from the community? All right, and how many folks are here from the school? A couple of you sprinkled around, excellent. Well, I got the chance to chat with some folks from the school this morning, and I'm just blown away by the amount of good work that both the school does and the center here does. It's amazing getting the chance to come to Little Rock. It's my first time. I thought I was going to Fayetteville, but I'm so glad that I ended up here. Truly, I have a friend who's from Dallas, and he said, "Oh, well, you have to go to this barbecue place and this, that, and the other." And I let him know the night before I came in that, I'm actually going to Little Rock. And he goes, "Oh, that's nice too." And I have to say, it's a beautiful town and a really beautiful community, and I've been blown away by how green it is here. It's still very gray up north, so it's nice to come to someplace where spring is. I want to talk about trash. I want to talk some trash for the next hour or so, if that's all right. And I'd like to make this, if we can, as much of a conversation as possible. So please, if you have questions throughout, we don't need to wait till the end to do, oh, thank you. Does this work? Yes, it does? No? Oh, they're working on it in the meantime. Yeah? Oh, perfect. I said I like to fidget, so it's nice to have something to fidget with. If you have questions throughout the process, please don't hesitate to ask them. I want to just tell you a little bit about my story, my journey, and how I ended up as a garbage man in a developing world country. And then I want to talk about where we're headed and what I believe is possible with business, and when we apply the principles of nonprofits, of mission, and of doing good in the world, and of purpose to for-profit businesses, what's possible. Because I believe that this is where the world is headed. I believe that the power of for-profit business has the ability to affect immense change, not only in America, but in other countries as well. And I think as the CEO of a small business like that we have an immense responsibility to develop organizations that run efficiently towards a social mission. So I'll start with this. This is a picture of a journal entry that I made about 6 days into a trip to Haiti after the earthquake, and this is a picture of Haiti right near Port-au-Prince where we work. Some people think that those two pictures are different pictures, that bottom thing is trash and then the top there is ocean, but that's the beach in Port-au-Prince. That's the number of bottles that covered it when we got there and what we saw. And I went there after the earthquake in 2010. I know everybody here has heard of the earthquake, and I know President Clinton was pretty deeply involved and still is in Haiti, which is how I got involved with the Clinton Foundation. But many people don't know the scale of the disaster. I think this morning, Little Rock's about, 250,000 people, something like that. So the earthquake, over the course of a minute and a half on an afternoon around rush hour in January of 2010, killed about 300,000 people over the course of a minute and a half in the days and weeks to follow. It left about 1.5 million people homeless. Now, I'm not quite sure how big Arkansas is, but it's a little bigger than that, but not much. So I want you to consider for a moment what would happen if the entire city of Little Rock was destroyed, and then if the entire state of Arkansas was left homeless, and what that would do, not just to this state, but to America and where we find ourselves. This is what happened to Haiti, and I can tell you that Haiti doesn't have quite the benefits of the booming economy that America has, or the ready-to-go workforce that America has. So when a disaster like this happens in a country like Haiti, and they happen all the time, it takes an already difficult situation and makes it 100x, 1,000x worse. And B, there's typically a deafening silence from the international community. We tend to read these things in the news and see them on TV and think, like I did when I first heard about it, oh, what a shame. And we go back to doing our work, and we might donate through our church or do something through a nonprofit or give a donation to the Red Cross, and all those things matter. But I can tell you that the vast majority of the time, whether it's here or in some other forgotten place somewhere else on the globe, that the biggest noise that you hear after these things is silence. And that's what I heard when I got on the ground there shortly after the earthquake in 2010. When I went, I realized that right away that the community was really a war zone. That was the best way to describe it. Now, I've been and had the chance to spend time in Africa and other parts of Central America, and seen a lot of poor neighborhoods and poor slums. But what was astounding to me about Haiti and about communities like it, and since in some even communities in the United States, how close to the United States that I was. Like, you feel like you're in the shadow of the U.S. You're only an hour and a half flight from Miami, and it was astounding to me that this was possible in a place that was so close to the biggest economy in the world. And to see this when I got there was unfortunately all too common. I see the same two things in Haiti that I see every other place that I've traveled in the low-income world. I see immense amounts of poverty, and in Haiti it's about 65-70% in most areas. And I see a lot of trash. So the journal entry was very simple. If Haiti could turn trash into money equals good. I hadn't thought about any more than that. And at the time, I meeting tons of people, and I was going down actually originally to take pictures. I used to be in marketing and television production, and I took pictures on the side. And the idea was I was going to go down, I was going to take a bunch of photos, and then I was going to sell them and give that money to some nonprofit, right? It's the exact opposite of what I tell people to do today. Just go to the disaster area. That's not always the best idea. And it's certainly not the most responsible one if you don't know anything about the dynamics of the community that you're serving. But I did that. I went, and I met a kid down there by the name of Tassy Fisame. And Tassy had a giant tumor on his face that, as it turns out, he was dying of. It was the size of a softball. And it was the type of thing that if he'd been born in the U.S., at the same time and place that I was born, that he'd had access to a doctor that would have made sure that thing was taken care of really immediately. It's the same type of medical issue that happens most times in the low-income world. It's lack of access more than lack of money. In the U.S. as well, by the way, when it comes to medical. And so my friends and I, we sold those photos. We raised some money. We got Tassy up to the States, and we got him a surgery where they took a piece of his leg bone, his fibula, and they made a new jaw for him. They took that whole thing out, and they made a new jaw for him. And he's a handsome guy. If you saw him today, you'd say, oh, you never even know he had a surgery. But he came up and lived with my roommate and my basset hound dog and me for 16 weeks, and what I'm certain is going to be a hilarious one-act play someday that I'll write about when Tassy came to the U.S. And it wasn't until after we decided that we were going to take Tassy back down to the neighborhood that he was from. And he's from a community called Cité Soleil, which is one of the poorest communities in the Western Hemisphere. And we got him back down into the neighborhood, and it was kind of time to finish this chapter. And we were really excited about all the good work that we'd done, right? It was a big pat ourselves on the shoulder moment. And it was in kind of bringing Tassy back down to his community that we realized that this entire exercise of raising the money and getting him fixed up and sorting out what was going on was for us, that it was selfish. This entire process of helping him made us feel good, but wasn't really doing anything necessarily for Tassy, because while we'd saved the immediate crisis, while we'd solved the symptom that he was suffering from, right, the sickness was still there, the cancer still existed, just in a different form. Because the neighborhood that he's from, the guys his age typically don't live too much past 17, and they usually die pretty violent deaths. So it got me thinking, like, what does it mean for the poor not to need us anymore, not to need the rich anymore? And gosh, that led to a rabbit hole, right? That's a big, we were talking about tumors, and now we're talking about big philosophical questions. And that led to a year and a half of me walking around Tassy's neighborhood and getting to know people and asking them, what does it mean to be poor? What does being poor mean? What does it mean to need help from somebody? What does it mean to not be poor anymore? And those were hard conversations to have, and a lot of surprised looks from people in the neighborhood. But I got the chance to learn Creole throughout the process. We learned what it meant to get folks to trust us in the neighborhoods we serve, and we started to learn how to come at these problems humbly and with humility, as opposed to coming down and just dropping aid or pulling people out of their neighborhood and fixing their jaws. And the answer that we got back was really surprising to me. The answer that we got back, I expected, would be, well, in order for us not to be poor anymore, we need more aid. We need the nonprofits to be here more. We need more people to show up. We need this, we need that, we need the other. And that wasn't what I heard at all. I heard two things. I heard, I want my kids to have a better life than me. And I need a job. I need a way to earn my own income. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like my goals in life, right? I want my kids to have a better life than me, and I want a career that I can find some purpose in, that I can put a roof over my head with, and maybe at the end of the day feel like I contributed to something. And it was at that moment that the whole thing unlocked for me. And it felt different than we'd been thinking about it before. This idea that for the poor not to need you anymore, they just want the chance to go to work every day. Put us in a situation where we finally understood what it meant to solve the problem. And that's where I realized that the single largest issue facing humanity, I believe, more than global warming, more than global epidemics, is poverty. And that poverty in and of itself is a disease. And if we treat it as such, we can end it, right? But the way that we need to treat it is by understanding what the immunization, what the medicine is for the disease. And what I discovered after working with Tassy and the people that we now serve in Haiti is that the immunization for poverty is a dignified job, period. Now, we hear that all the time. Politicians tell us that. We think about that as economic indicators in places that we live. But when I talk about the silence that exists in the developing world, these are not the words that we use when we talk about poverty. We talk about how can we donate more clothes? How can we donate more medicine? How can we donate? And all we're doing is keeping the poor poor in those situations. So that's a long introduction to the story. But what it begged us to do was to address the problem at hand, which is how do we put as many jobs in place as possible? It was then that I realized that the reason that organizations do this is not because they're not full of smart people. It's also not because the mission in and of itself is not virtuous or good. I think, and I know, people are trying to do the right thing. What we realize is that people are not trained in economic development in communities around starting businesses, right? We always say there's a lot of people from Harvard Kennedy School coming to help in Haiti, and not enough people from Harvard Business School, right? We need startups and founders to be thinking of how we can create engines in these places that offer equity as well as jobs. So as I look around at a community with 65, 70% unemployment, and now in addition to Tassy, we're working with almost 1,000 people who are all now asking us for jobs, and realizing that there wasn't a mechanism in place to actually place them into something, we decided we needed to create some. And that's where Thread was born. That's where my company was born. So faced with the opportunity to create some jobs, we decided that went back to that journal entry, if Haiti can turn trash into money equals good. I looked at all the trash on the ground and I said, there's gotta be something we can do with this. And like any good millennial, I went home and I Googled, what can I turn trash into? And I realized that among the really many beautiful things that waste can be turned into, fabric chief among them, that the apparel industry was in a lot of trouble. I also realized that the companies that are out there that are trying to sell things to people these days are doing it in a way that it used to work in, right? What's worked is not working any longer. If you're under 35 and you go to buy things, you're now looking for an experience. You're now looking for opportunity to connect and participate in a brand. If you're over 35, you're likely looking for, what's the discount this week, right? Where do I go to shop to get the best deal? Now, that's fine. That's the way, that's the way that 35 and older is connected for forever. And now we've got a new generation that's thinking about brands a little differently. And what we found, and we started to do some studying about this and a lot of research about it, is that companies that connect radically with the world around them, they just do better. Not just better in terms of their mission, right, which is to sell more stuff. Not just better in terms of what they hope to do with the world, but in terms of actually selling more stuff. Right? Brands that decide to connect with the world around them and adopt either social programs or some element of social and environmental responsibility, they perform better. They earn more profit, which is interesting, right? Like, we can now leverage, for the first time in history, one of the most powerful engines for ending poverty on the planet, the most powerful, and use it for good in a way we had never thought of before. That was super exciting to me. I want to just show you a quick video. Oh, you know what? I don't know if there's sound on here. I'm sorry, I didn't even think about this. This is where I tap dance while we wait. Yeah, Nikolai. Cool. So I'm going to show you a quick video about how all this works, and with a brand that we work with called Timberland. But before we do that, and they're thinking about how to get sound on here, does anybody have any questions? Oh, you got to ask me one question so we can draw out some time. Here we go. Oh, yes, go ahead, please.
Looking at the...
I'm so sorry.
I mean, looking at the situation...
I can hear you.
Okay. Looking at the situation in Haiti, particularly during earthquake times.
Yeah. Oh, now you got 3 microphones around.
How did you end up with this particular idea of transforming trash into dollars? But why? I mean, your background is different.
Yeah, my background's different. That's what my mom says. Yes. So I knew that I wanted to start a business. I knew that it was clear to me that I didn't want to start just a nonprofit. I started a nonprofit that places the poor into jobs. And then, like I said, I needed a mechanism of jobs in order to place those people into. And the business came along. So I said, okay, I need to start a business. But rather, like most people who start a business, most people have an idea and they say, okay, I have to figure out how to make this idea. So they reach down into a supply chain and they say, all right, we're going to make it in China. We're going to design it here. We're going to deliver it to you. That's not how I came to business. I came to business with a problem, a social problem, and said, we need a business here. What can we make? Right? A little bit different and a little bit backwards. And at that point, it was just about looking at what resources we had available. And in Haiti, where there aren't a lot of resources, right? It's an undereducated population, not enough access to the things that you typically need in order to create business. I looked around and said, what's the one resource I see the most of? And I saw trash. And I said, gosh, there's a lot of this. Like, if we can figure out how to make this valuable, we can do something here. So that's essentially how I came to it. Actually, that's a really good segue, because I can show you now how that works in terms of what we do with brands.
I had the chance to go to Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. In addition to falling in love with the country, literally I wrote in my journal at the very beginning of this process, if Haiti can turn trash into money equals good. What we've found is poverty is not about the absence of money. It's about the absence of dignity. It starts with a job, with a dignified opportunity to go to work in the world. My name is Rosenberger, and I started the Thread about 5 years ago. So we pull trash from the very poorest neighborhoods in the world and we turn it into fabric. Jobs cure poverty. This fabric creates jobs. It starts with a plastic bottle. From there, it's like crushed up, ground up, washed, turned into thread, filament, and then finally woven into a canvas product when it comes to Timberland, and now they're on people's feet. Women working is really the heart of our work. Then there comes this like little Nancy rolls through and starts rolling up super sacks with her name on them. And as time went on, she was building an empire.
Si les deux pas du sorti aujourd'hui, on chita la caille. Et puis tout ça fait me sentir plus à l'aise. C'est parce que moi que une série de clients, travailleurs, ils pas fait personne de confiance que moi.
Showing people what that trash has turned into adds elegance and dignity to that work. We don't actually pick up waste. We make clothes for a living. These boots helped give somebody a job. That's the future of apparel. It has to be useful, it has to look awesome, and it also has to have purpose. Timberland's a brand that we know shares our values, but what's actually more important than that is the fact that their customers share our values too. From a bottle collector to a center owner to a washer to a yarn spinner and now to you. By just putting on your boots in the morning, you can make a difference in somebody else's life, and you can look damn good doing it.
There's been like 3 or 4 times I've shown that video and I'm actually wearing the same shirt. And it's very embarrassing. So today I decided I was going to make sure I didn't wear the same shirt. But these are some of the boots that we make with Timberland. I'll pass them around. I said to the kids yesterday, be careful if they're smelly. I apologize, but because I wear them every day. But you can pass them around. They feel and they look just like boots, then they're made out of trash. The idea here is simple, and it's an evolution in the way business is done. And if there's one thing I want you to walk away from today, taking away, is that business today is different in 2018 than it was in the 1950s, than it was again in the 1970s, and than it will be 20 years from now. Right? And what's happening in business that's so exciting, whether you're a student at this school or in this community, is that we're moving towards a model in which people care more about what their brands do than in any time in history. They care more about how brands operate, how brands make their stuff, what they charge for it, who it's affecting because of the work, than they ever have before. Now, I'm from Pittsburgh. And believe it or not, the charity scene in America started in Pittsburgh in the 1800s with Andrew Carnegie, right? One of the most famous Pittsburghers, started Carnegie Mellon among many other things. Not a very good guy, as it turns out. The Homestead Steelworkers strikes that happened in the 1800s happened because Andrew Carnegie wasn't paying enough money, right? And people died. There was a big strike. People came in and they died. And Andrew Carnegie, in an effort to get his company out of the muck, right, and out of the PR scene that was happening because of those people dying, decided to give a bunch of money away. It was, this hand's happening over here, people are dying, so my company, Carnegie Steel, is going to give a ton of money away. And that's why Pittsburgh is one of the most well-endowed art scenes in the world, because Andrew Carnegie wasn't that good of a guy. Isn't that interesting? That's where it started. That's where charity and the idea of businesses giving money away began, right? Then it changed again in the 1900s. And a lot of it happened actually in the 60s, around the Earth Day movement, and the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Air Act, right? And Rachel Carson, also, by the way, from Pittsburgh, writing Silent Spring. There's a theme here about Pittsburgh you'll continue to see. Little Rock's cool too, though. I like it. But in the 60s and 70s, there was this movement towards environmental, right? And that we'd never seen before. And companies, for the first time, started to say, you know what, we're going to offer our employees the opportunity to do a little service, to give back. And you started to see employee programs that started to exist around these types of things. And companies then, now, were starting to popularize the idea of donating money to charity. But that yet wasn't where we were headed. Another guy came along in the mid-2000s. His name is Blake Mycoskie, and he started a company called Tom's Shoes. How many people have heard of Tom's Shoes? Most people by now. All right. Tom's Shoes is a company where they make shoes, very basic shoes, and for every pair they make, they give a pair away to the poor. Right? Now, this is the first time a company came along and said, wow, like, we're going to make a pair of shoes and we're going to give a pair away over here, like, actively. They're going to, in the face of losing margin on our product, we're going to do this. Now, Tom's Shoes, not the best model for the poor, right? Because it goes back to that same idea of giving things away as opposed to helping people get jobs. But we stand on the shoulders of giants. When Blake started the company, he had no idea. He thought this was the best way to do it. And it's to date given millions and millions of shoes to people who haven't had the opportunity to wear shoes, right? But now I believe that the next iteration and where this is going is by building good into your business model, by offering people to have jobs in a way that actually helps pull them out of poverty, that you can not only like create a ton of jobs and end poverty in a community, but you can also sell more stuff, right? You can also make that a valuable part of your business. You saw in the video a woman named Nancy. Nancy 5 years ago didn't have a job at all, and now because of Thread, she has 12 employees. She just bought her first car. She's a badass, right? For lack of a better word. She's come from nothing and created something. If that's not the American entrepreneurial spirit, I don't know what is. I see the best business people I've ever seen on the streets and in the slums of Haiti. And I'm so excited to now begin to share that, what we learned there, with the work that we're now doing in Pittsburgh, which I'll talk about in a second. So at our most basic, this is what we do. We create useful stuff people love out of trash from the poorest communities in the world. And then we just tell people about it. I talked a little bit about this. I love that term, well-defined soul. Yeah, the idea of recycled materials has been around for quite some time. People have been making stuff, and actually chances are right now you're all wearing something that is made out of a recycled plastic bottle. Polyester is the single most used fiber on the planet. Over half of the things that we make and clothes that we make are made out of polyester. The vast majority of clothes out there use some element of recycled polyester, but the reason that people don't tell you about it is because the vast majority of people that are picking up that plastic aren't very well paid. Many times it's picked up by kids, or there's forced child labor. These are things the industry doesn't want to talk about because they know what would happen if they did. In an era where people care about where their things come from, this has never been more important to talk about. So what we do essentially is, in addition to selling the material to brands like Timberland and now to brands like Reebok and Marmot, J. Crew, when we sell the material, we're able to trace, this is a map of Haiti, we're able to trace where that material comes back in a really, really real way. We keep track of all the people who are part of the process. Right now we've got about 50, 60 direct employees in Haiti and another 2,000 folks that are earning income. And essentially we just make sure that we keep all that cataloged. And that when things come along and things come up in their life that their business needs to get better because of, we intervene and help them get better. So the network on the ground is a little bit like Uber or Lyft, the car sharing service that you've heard of maybe, where people can sign into our process and in turn get access to the services that we offered. What that does is it offers one of the really key things that brands need in order to help make a case for good, make a business case for good. It offers trust. Right? That's one key element of what brands need to sell things. The other thing that we do is, when I say we intervene with the people that we serve, we do it in real ways. And that offers the other thing that brands need, authenticity. Those two things, trust and authenticity, when combined, create what we call business case for good. When a brand is more trustworthy and authentic, that's what helps it sell more stuff and sell better stuff. And that's what we say we offer to brands by doing the things that we do. So far about 3,000 jobs supported. This number is different now. It's about actually 50 million bottles saved from landfills and oceans. We tell brands that we can decrease their supply chain liabilities. Brands who are worried about child labor, things like that, we say, look, we take that off the table for you. CFOs love that. And we offer consistent urban markets for the poor in the same way that coffee co-ops or cotton co-ops offer consistent markets for the rural poor. People in urban areas don't necessarily have access to those things. That's what we've been able to do. This is Nadine, by the way. She's one of our other center owners. I'm going to skip this. But the upshot is all that means that companies make more money. I'll show you another quick video. Oops, maybe not. Actually, I just want to get to, here we go.
With Thread, the ability to allow the consumer to have that personal connection with people in the supply chain, it's being able to introduce the consumer to somebody like one of the recyclers. Her name is Nancy. She kind of is prescient in my mind because she's so proud about the business that she's been able to build as a result of the opportunity to take these recycled bottles and send them on their way to companies like Timberland. Consumers have a ton bombarding them these days. How do you get them to stop and care? And this engagement metric really says, I've stopped and I've cared.
You can have a partnership with a nonprofit or with any kind of organization, and if it's not sustainable from a business model perspective, it's not delivering sales, margin, profit, then you're not going to continue to do it. Thread to me is that holy grail because we've managed to create a beautiful product that stands for what we believe in and is selling incredibly well.
So it's funny, the way we had to start thinking was just like Catherine Cousins thinks, because she's the VP of strategy at a major global brand. If we want to do good for people, we have to figure out what actually makes the screws turn for the businesses that have the power to make that difference, right? So in order for us to do good, we had to help brands understand what actually drove sales for them. And what we know drives sales is the two things I mentioned before. When you're able to do that and leverage that, you can do immense amounts of good. Right, I go to sleep every night thinking about how we can serve the people we serve in Haiti more effectively. And I know that the number one way to do that is by leveraging business. I want to end just by talking about one other thing. It's the work that we're about to do now here in Pittsburgh. So I mentioned I'm from Pittsburgh. This is the neighborhood that we work in now, and or our office is called Homewood. I always say that I'm old enough to remember when the steel mills closed in Pittsburgh, but young enough not to give a damn. That I don't care about what the economy was like in the 1970s and 80s. I care much more about where we're headed. And where we're headed in some parts of Pittsburgh is a very good place. Pittsburgh is one of the most livable cities in America right now. It has one of the lowest rates of unemployment. It got through the 2008 crisis in ways that some of the other Rust Belt cities didn't have to deal with. Unfortunately, it's also one of the least diverse communities in America. The access to jobs is there if you were born white and wealthy, but not there if you were born black and poor. And this is the same thing that happens in communities like Haiti. We've also been a town that's made things consistently throughout our history. It's something that we take very seriously in Pittsburgh, from our sports teams to the industries that we come from. So we started to figure out how we might connect with those ideals. And that love affair with Pittsburgh made me decide that instead of now just selling fabric to big brands, that we were going to start making our own product. And we were going to connect the story of Nancy and Nadine in Haiti and help employ people in Homewood, in the neighborhood that we serve there, so that we could create a product that started as trash on the streets of one of the poorest neighborhoods in the world and end as a product that you can buy for sale by thread. The reason that we decided to do that, in addition to all those reasons, is because I believe that big brands aren't moving fast enough to tackle these issues. We don't have enough time, right? And I only have, I hope, 40 or 50 years left, but that's not enough time to actually make the change that we think is possible across the industry. So we've started to engage radically now in this neighborhood, and the things that we've learned there are just incredible. The neighborhood that we serve is really amazing. There's brands like this all over America that are starting to crop up in ways I think that are really powerful, and I want to mention. This is a brand, if you haven't heard of, called Shinola. It's doing really amazing things with watches, and they've done really incredible things in neighborhoods of Detroit. The idea of imported from Detroit is something that's become very popular, and that idea, that element of reawakening in communities that haven't had access to those jobs is something that is very powerful to consumers. And something that I think is a potential for in communities here like Little Rock. Another one that we've learned a lot from is a guy named Hamdi Ulukaya. And I first got to see Hamdi speak at a Clinton Foundation event in New York City, and he's a hero of mine. Hamdi is Turkish, and his parents were herders and nomads in Turkey, and he got the chance to come to the United States on a scholarship. And he told his mom that he'd be spending 2 years in the States learning English, and then he called her one day and said, "I'm never coming back." Could you imagine what moms are like? I know what my mom's like when I said I'm going to Haiti for the first time. I can only imagine what it's like if I said I wasn't coming back. But Hamdi was driven by something I think is really powerful, which is a need to get the thing that he loved back home. Hamdi grew up eating yogurt. And when he came to the States, he realized that he couldn't get the yogurt that he loved back home very easily. The yogurt in the States at the time was that kind of sugary, watery version. And remember, as a herder in Turkey, they made yogurt every day. His mom made yogurt every day, but he couldn't find any. So he found an old Kraft plant that had shut down in upstate New York, and he opened it back up, and he started making a yogurt that now everybody knows about, but at the time nobody knew about. Greek yogurt, Greek-style yogurt was where Hamdi came to play. He created an organization called Chobani, which you've all now, I'm sure, heard of in terms of yogurt, one of the best sellers in the category, and he created an entire category around it. What's incredible about this story is that when he decided to hire people for that factory, he went to the poorest neighborhoods and to people who were otherwise unemployable. And he said, "You're the ones I want to hire." So now, in his factories in Idaho and upstate New York, there are 15 different languages spoken. They've got translators that help people understand what's happening on other parts of the line. And he's giving jobs to people that otherwise wouldn't be employable, right? He's also giving jobs, by the way, to people who are from the community and have been there for a long time. And I think it's that mix where America's future lies when it comes to jobs. How do we give the job that employs the out-of-work steel worker or the out-of-work auto worker or the out-of-work farmer, as well as provide and create jobs for the folks who are coming to our shores from places looking for opportunity? I believe so strongly in the immigrant. I think it's something that America was built on. And I think that when we can combine those two groups of people, who, by the way, share way more than they think, that we can create a version of ourselves that we can only aspire to today. I think for me, that is the definition of where business is going and the definition of what we're all about as a national community. And I hope to be able to follow examples like Hamdi. With that, I'll stop right now and we can take some questions. But thank you so much for having me. How much time do we have? Okay, perfect. That's great. Good. Yes, go ahead.
So to your last point, Ian, how do we change the dialogue in the country about immigrants and refugees and people who are not as employable in some minds?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think we need to, every time we've reached for the better angels of our nature as a national community, we always end up doing something amazing. And I think it's about looking at communities not as something to be feared, but as something to embrace as a resource and an opportunity. Every time we've done that as a community, we've come out on top. I got the chance today to go to Little Rock High School this morning, it was the first time I'd been, and you don't pass through Little Rock very often, so to get the chance to see the high school, first of all, it's just beautiful. But you have in this city a shining example of what it means when we as a community come together and say, no, it's not enough to settle for what we used to do. We need to reach deeper and embrace a community that we otherwise would ignore. And when we do that, good things happen. Is it tumultuous? Is it messy? Is it inefficient? Does it create a lot of angst? Yes, all of those things are true. But I can tell you, it's no more angst than we feel right now as a national community. So, yes.
Hey, my name is Alex Lannis. I'm actually a former student here at the Clinton School, and I was actually also in Haiti after the earthquake.
Okay.
I moved there in 2011, and I had my undergrad in finance, and so my background is in business as well. So I agree that business is a powerful tool to be able to move change, affect change in communities. But when you have a place like Haiti, or in a society today where people are required to have increasing technical skill and knowledge to be able to get jobs and be able to provide for their families and move their communities forward. How can they get that training if it's just businesses focusing on development rather than also non-government organizations and government? And how can we pay for it?
Those are both good questions. Somebody asked me that same question about Pittsburgh last week, so I'll answer the first part of it the same way, and remind me if I'm not answering it. So, but I think first and foremost, the jobs to employ people who require months instead of years of training still exists. And never more so than they do in places like Haiti, right? The problem is when shoe companies like Tom's come in and give away shoes, you put cobblers out of business. So we have to remember that we are all connected, that we are all part of one organization, one community, and the things that we do over here affect the things that we do over here. So I think we need to first get smarter about how the movement of goods and services affects the poor generally. So that's the first thing. I think that there are plenty of jobs available for folks who need to operate a sewing machine instead of needing to operate a computer. That said, we also need to believe that the poor who are underemployed or untrained are capable of learning those things and put programs into place that even give them a shot. right? I think that to me is the low-hanging fruit. We're not even going into these communities and saying, hey, do you want to learn how to code? I can tell you that they do, right? That they absolutely do. Most people just haven't had access to that opportunity. So we need to be able to place opportunity with resource in a way that actually matches that. But the second part of your question is the most interesting, is how do we get people to pay for it? And what I believe is I'm expecting you all to pay for it. And what I mean by that is I want to create a good that is popular enough that you want to buy it. Not just because it has a great story. That's important, by the way. But it actually has to work. Right? Like you want to have a pair of shoes at the right price, that you need to fit the right way, they need to look good on your feet, right? But then, by the way, oh yeah, it has this great story attached to it, oh, I'll buy that over somebody else who doesn't have that story attached, right? Like, I'm not saying that we create goods as a pity to the poor. I'm not saying we do it because for the sake of it. I'm saying that I have a responsibility to making a good that you all want to buy. Timberland has a responsibility to making a good you want to buy, Reebok, etc. Right? And I expect that if we make that good competitive enough, you're going to buy it, right? That allows me to finance all the stuff that I want to do. Not because it's like a charity part of my business or another line item. I put all of our impact line items under marketing. So like I'm driven to make a product that you want to buy, and then I can take all those dollars back in and plow them back into creating programs that offer access to the poor. So I'm expecting, and I believe, that the single greatest engine for change in human history is sitting in this room right now. And you're all participating every day in a system where you're buying goods and services. All I'm saying is that we should attach the element of impact to those goods and services in a way that increases your want for them. Right? If we can't do that, we're not doing anything. And what I expect is that the balance of the things that we pay for every year and the balance of the things that we give away every year are vastly different. Right? We might give away 5-6% of our income if we're good, 7%. Right? Some folks who are in the Judeo-Christian way of thinking give a certain percentage of their money away. Some folks in the Islam religion do the same. So like there's an element of us giving things away. It's not enough. I want the pot of money where you're spending on your coffee every day. I want the pot of money that goes after your cell phone bill. I want the pot of money that goes after your jeans and your shoes. All the things right now that are just throwaway items that we would buy that because we think it looks good. If we can create businesses that compete based on how good they're doing for people and the stories that we tell, that's how we pay for it. Martha, hi.
Let me get a mic to you.
Could you walk us through Nancy's journey from being unemployed to where she is today?
Yeah, sure. And her story is very representative, by the way, of a lot of people we serve. We met Nancy in probably 2013, 2014, before we'd ever made fabric. And we got the opportunity to meet her because there was a program that had started. Some nonprofit had started a program called Ramasser L'argent, and Ramasser L'argent in Creole means picking up money. And the idea behind the program was people were getting paid per pound to pick up plastic. And it was that simple. There wasn't much more to it than that. And we saw the program. We liked some of the elements they were doing. There wasn't a lot of dignity to the work. So we started to meet people who were part of that program. And we, like a lot of folks that you come through a program like that, you realize that some people are special. And Nancy had a approach that was very economical, efficient, entrepreneurial, that we noticed right away. You can see a business person from a mile away. She just got it, right? And there are some folks, we talk all the time in low-income communities about creating entrepreneurs, right? Like the big thing we talk about is how many entrepreneurs can we create? Well, I got news, like not everybody's an entrepreneur. Not everybody wants to start a business. Most people just want to get up at 8 o'clock, go in, punch a clock, get paid, and go home, right? Most people. However, there are folks like Nancy that come along, and when they do, you feel like you're not feeding them enough, and if you're not giving them, entrepreneurial things to do. So we asked her if she wanted to be what we call a center owner, and what that is a person who is a node within our network where people can now bring plastic or picking it up or saving it in their community, and then that person aggregates it. They do some sorting, they take the labels off, they keep the books, they weigh it, and then they move it to a central location. In this case, Nancy lives in the south part of Haiti, and she has to move the product about 60 miles to Port-au-Prince. So we asked her if she wanted to do that. And we said, we'll help you get started. And we have a no-interest loan program that we offer to people. And it's small amounts of money, $200, $300. And what it does is it helps people like Nancy get started. And we have a 2-year repayment process that is pretty flexible that allows them to get moving. And she blew through the $200 in like a week and a half. And she came back and was like, I'd like to double down. I want more money because I can hire more people. And I was like, oh, she came to play. So within like 4 months, she had 6 employees. A year later, she had 12. And then she came to us and said, I'd like a baler. Now, a baler is a machine that increases the weight of the material, right? It densifies it. So it bales the plastic bottles. So that usually they're carrying these big things called super sacks. You can get about 100, 200 pounds in a bag. But with a baler, you can increase the density so that you get about 200 pounds into a cube about this big. Nancy went through the numbers and decided if she got a baler, she can move 10 times as much material to Port-au-Prince every week and then take all that money home. So she started coming to us and said, can you buy me a baler? And we said, well, we'll loan you the money. Nancy gets a baler. And then she buys a car. So I think her goal is to set up her own trucking system, where she now, and so she's like the trash queen of Haiti at this point. But she is going to eventually buy her own truck. So you can see, like, nobody taught Nancy how to do it. She just had it. It's there. Now, the benefit of supporting that person, right, who we would never have seen otherwise, right, is untold to not just the 12 people that work for her, but the truck driver she'll hire to drive that truck, but the person who's going to operate the baler, right, to the people whose kids that those people come home to at the end of the night. One person that we can support and just get out of the way, right, has an impact on literally hundreds of people in that part of Haiti. When Hurricane Matthew happened 2 falls ago, it hit a part of the country that Nancy lives in, and people who store plastic, when they store it, in order for it not to get stolen, they store it in big piles, unbaled, right? Because you can steal a bale, but it's hard to like gather up enough bottles to like make off with in the night. So they just store it in these big piles. So when a hurricane comes along, it blows them all away. So Nancy lost all of her inventory in a night, and we get a phone call from her. She's like, I'd just like a loan to get back started and have enough inventory because my people can't work. Within 4 days after the earthquake, where every other business in that part of Haiti was wiped off the map, Nancy was doing business again. So when I talk about the impact of what business can do, like, this is what I mean. Nancy can put people to work in a way that a nonprofit never can, period. End of story. And all we need to do is be able to figure out where those stories are and replicate them, right? And then get out of the way. Because she's a better business person than I'll ever be. So, we have time for one more question? Yeah.
Yes. It's a very difficult process from bottle to thread.
Yes.
Did you have a technology license or something? How did you?
No. My director of production used to teach English. So I was saying before the talk that I think naivete is one of the greatest assets, undiscovered assets in business, because you have no idea how to approach a problem. You just want to get to a solution. And I have since learned that there are areas where experts really come in handy. But when it comes to processes, what we realize is that the way that the recycling industry in America had been working for the previous 50 years is not where it needs to work in order to function in the future, which is why there's so much recycling happening in China and Japan and the other areas. We're not competing well enough. So we decided that we would take off-the-shelf technology and just replicate it. No, there's no license to the business. It's all about process and finding opportunity in areas that right now don't exist.
I have a last question from me, which is, the corruption in all developing countries is significant.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, Haiti is not singular in that respect. How do you go through the political obstacles, corruption issues, and social issues?
Yeah, by way of answering the question, I'll tell you a quick story. I was just in Dhaka in Bangladesh. We're thinking about taking our process and bringing it to that part of Asia. And I went, and I have this weird skill now where I can go to a landfill in a country and tell you how developed the economy is. It's a very strange, it's like knowing Latin. There's not a lot I can do with it. But I go to the landfill in communities and we assess where that economy is in terms of its recycling and waste infrastructure. And we went to Dhaka, we realized that they were already well on their way to understanding that waste is a resource and that they can leapfrog landfill technology in the same way that Africa used cell phones to leapfrog landline technology. And so there's lots and lots of people picking up waste, saving waste. And there's lots of these little micro enterprises. A person owns a baler and everybody comes and brings their trash. But there's not a lot of capital at the base of the supply chain. And the capital is what greases the wheels, right? So what happens is you get guys and gals who come in who have capital, but they charge immense interest rates for it. So they'll say to somebody, they'll say to 50 or 60 people, hey, all of you, I'm gonna give you the cash you need to buy and sell this material, but I'm gonna charge you 30 or 40% interest on it. And you're gonna work for me now. And I'm going to buy your other debt up, right? Those are things that happen all the time. The corruption that we see exist doesn't necessarily happen as much from governments. In fact, governments, for the most part, haven't cared, right, so far. And the biggest area we find that is at ports. It's hard to move goods in and out sometimes. But what we found is, like with most politicians, if we just invite them to the opening ceremony and give them all the credit, they generally leave us alone. And that's what we've decided to do in Haiti. But the corruption that exists in those bottom parts of the supply chain are the things that we need to really work through. I think the way that you combat that is just by being a better business person. If I can go into Dhaka and I can say, look, 60 people who've been being charged 30 or 40% interest, I'm going to offer you a loan, but I'm going to offer it at 4% interest. Do you want my money or do you want his money, right? It's an easy deal. Oh, by the way, I'm buying up all of your debt so that you don't owe that guy anymore, right? You owe us, and actually the interest rate's not 4%, it's 0%. Now, like, it's a risk, right? It puts my team at a little bit more risk than it would otherwise because there's some, loan shark who's going to lose a lot of money because of us. But it takes those types of decisions as a business and saying, this is just part of our model to be able to work through those things. But I think you solve those issues black and white with spreadsheets.
Ian, thank you. That was excellent. And I want to, before I thank Stephanie Street and Lena and others with the Clinton Foundation for bringing you here. Alex Landis, who asked you that question about Haiti, before you leave, you guys need to have a conversation because he's doing great stuff in Haiti too. And so, Ian, let's give Ian a round of applause here. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Lena. Ben, thank you all. And come visit with Ian.